The first time Marcus Hale saw her, she was dying. He almost didn't go down into the ravine at all. The drop was a good 40 feet. The rock face was slick from 3 days of rain, and he had 8 crates of medical supplies on the back of his crawler that weren't going to deliver themselves to the Kestrel Station outpost. He was already 2 days behind schedule. He was already tired. He was already, if he was being honest with himself, done with this planet. Frontier Survey Contract 7 Delta. That's what the posting had called it. 3 years mapping resource deposits in the shale corridor on Verada III, a world so far out on the galactic rim that the nearest Terran consolidated base was 14 light hours away by tight beam. The pay was good. The solitude was good. The solitude was also, he had discovered, the kind of thing that wore on a man until he couldn't quite remember the sound of another person's laughter. He parked the crawler on the ridge, climbed out into the gray morning air and looked down. Something was moving. Not like an animal. Animals on Verada III tended to move in bursts, freeze, dash, freeze again, the cautious rhythm of creatures that had evolved in a world full of things with teeth. This was a different kind of movement, slow, labored, the movement of something trying very hard not to give up. Marcus squinted. The light was bad, the ravine full of shadow, but he could make out a shape against the gray rock, too tall, too thin, limbs at the wrong angles. Definitely not local fauna. He swore. He looked at his crawler. He looked at his schedule on the wrist unit. He looked back down into the ravine. "I'm going to regret this," he said to no one. He rigged a line to the crawler's tow hook, tested the anchor twice, and went over the edge. She was wedged between 2 boulders near the ravine floor, half submerged in a runoff stream that was cold enough to make his hands ache just touching it. Up close, she was clearly not human. The skin was a deep violet gray, almost the color of storm clouds, and her eyes, when they cracked open at the sound of his boots on the rock, were a pale, luminous amber that seemed to generate their own faint light. 4 fingers on each hand. Ears that swept back along the skull in elegant, pointed ridges. A face that was, in its structure, eerily close to human, but subtly, profoundly wrong, the proportions off in ways that bypassed conscious analysis and went straight to instinct. Alien, Zenvari, he thought, based on the bone structure. The only spacefaring species currently active in this sector besides humans. She was wearing what had once been fine clothing. He could tell by the cut, the quality of the fabric even soaked and torn, and she had a deep laceration across her left side that had bled extensively and was still seeping. Her breathing was shallow. She was in shock. She looked up at him with those amber eyes and said something in Zenvari that his translation implant rendered as approximately, "Go away. I do not require assistance." Marcus crouched beside her. "You're in a ravine, in a flooding stream, with a stab wound." A pause while the implant worked both ways. Then, "I am aware of my circumstances." "Okay," he said, "I'm going to pick you up now." "You will not." "Yeah," he said, "I will." She fought him. He gave her credit for that. She was half-drowned and bleeding and hypothermic, and she still managed to get a grip on his jacket lapel and try to push him away with what was left of her strength. It wasn't much. He was a large man who had spent 3 years doing physical labor on a heavy gravity survey world, and she weighed perhaps 50 kilos soaking wet. He got her over his shoulder, wrapped his free arm around the rope, and started climbing. She called him 11 different things during the climb. His translation implant rendered approximately 6 of them. The other 5 it declined to translate, flagging them as culturally specific invective, no adequate equivalent. He got her over the ridge, got her into the crawler's cab, and cranked the heat. She sat in the passenger seat with her arms crossed, shivering violently, jaw set in an expression of profound displeasure. "There's a first aid kit in the back," Marcus said, already moving toward it. "I need to look at that wound." "You need to take me to the nearest port city." "Port City is 6 hours out. You'll bleed out in 2. He found the kit, came back, opened it on the seat between them. I'm going to lift your shirt to look at the wound. Is that acceptable? She stared at him for a long moment. Those amber eyes were extraordinary. He found it difficult to read them the way he would a human face, but something in them shifted. A calculation, maybe. Reluctant arithmetic. Proceed, she said. The wound was bad but not unsurvivable. Deep. Whatever had made it had been sharp and deliberate, but it had missed anything critical. He cleaned it, closed it with the emergency suture strips, packed it with the antiseptic gel designed for multi-species use. She sat absolutely still throughout, which was either stoicism or the particular discipline of someone who had been trained to endure pain without expression. He suspected the latter. "What's your name?" he asked as he worked. "You may call me Sira." Not her real name. He recognized the evasion but didn't press. Marcus Hale. Survey contractor. I know what you are. Your crawler has a Terran consolidated registry plate. What were you doing in the ravine? The amber eyes went flat. That is not your concern. Fair enough. He finished with the wound, sat back. There's a thermal blanket in the storage compartment. Emergency rations if you're hungry. I can have you to Port Vesa in 6 hours, or, he paused. There's a Terran outpost 4 hours out. Kestrel Station. Small, but they have a proper medical bay. She said nothing for a moment. Then, the Kestrel Station outpost. Yes, that will, she stopped. Something moved through her expression that he couldn't quite name. That will be acceptable. He put the crawler in gear and started driving. She fell asleep within 20 minutes. He didn't blame her. He drove through the gray morning, through the strange flat light of a system with 2 pale suns, and tried not to think about the fact that whatever had put her in that ravine with a stab wound had probably not finished with her yet. Part 2. What she was. He found out what she actually was on the second day. Kestrel Station was small, 14 permanent residents, a medical bay staffed by a doctor named Inez Carvalho, who had been waiting 22 months for her transfer papers to clear, a communications array that worked about 60% of the time, and a general store run by a former long-haul pilot named Chev who had opinions about everything and shared all of them freely. Chev was the one who told him. "You know who that is," Chev said, leaning across the counter with the particular intensity of a man who had been waiting a very long time for interesting news. "That Zenvari woman you brought in." She said her name was Sira. "Sira," Chev laughed. "Yeah, that's one of her names, shortened version. Her full name is Saravethnal of House Veras, third in line to the Zenvari high throne." He let that sit. "A princess, Marcus. You fished a princess out of a ditch." Marcus considered this. Is that why someone stabbed her? Probably. Chev's expression shifted, going somewhere more serious. There's been chatter on the long-range bands. Zenvari political situation's been unstable for about 8 months. Something about a succession dispute after the old High Regent died. 2 of the noble houses are pushing for a consolidation of power, and the current royal line is. He drew a finger across his throat. Someone's trying to remove the succession line. That's one way to put it. The other way is that someone hired 3 of the best Zenvari Assassination Guild contractors available and sent them out to eliminate the princess during her diplomatic survey tour of the Outer Rim. Chev raised an eyebrow. Tour that was, apparently, also a way to get her out of the protected sphere before the political situation resolved. Marcus looked toward the door of the medical bay, beyond which the princess, was sleeping under Inez's supervision. "Does she know you know who she is?" "I suspect she knows I suspected. We haven't discussed it." Chev paused. "What are you going to do?" "I delivered my medical supplies. My contract says I go back out for the next survey leg starting tomorrow." "And?" Marcus said nothing for a moment. Then, "How far out are those contractors, do you think?" "If they tracked her to the ravine, maybe 12 hours. maybe less. He went back to the medical bay. She was awake, sitting up in the cot with her arms crossed, wearing a borrowed set of station fatigues that were slightly too short in the leg and too wide in the shoulder. She still looked like someone who expected to be obeyed. He was beginning to think that was just her face. "You know," she said, when he came in and closed the door behind him, "that you're a princess, yeah." Her chin came up. "It changes nothing." "Okay. I will not ask for your help. I require passage to Port Vesa and from there to the nearest Zinvari-aligned station. I can arrange." "Your people tried to kill you," Marcus said. He sat down in the chair beside the cot. "Not random people, Zinvari contractors. Which means they know Zinvari high-clearance travel protocols and they knew your route." He watched her face. "You can't buy passage through any normal channel without flagging your location. Every travel registry in this sector connects to a hub database that at least 6 different Zinvari intelligence services can access." Silence. "Port Vesa," he continued, "has 3 Zinvari trade consulates. All of them will have contacts who can reach the guild." He let that land. "You go to Port Vesa, you're already dead." The amber eyes hadn't left his face. "You have given this considerable thought." "I've had 2 hours. She looked at him for a long moment. "What are you suggesting?" "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I think you need to stay off the main routes. And I think the survey crawler is the least trackable vehicle in this sector right now, because it's registered to a one-man operation with a Terran contract, and Terran Consolidated doesn't share registry data with Zinvari intelligence services." Another silence. Something shifted in her expression, not softness exactly, but a recalibration. "You would do this," she said carefully. "Involve yourself in Zinvari succession politics." "I'm not getting involved in Zinvari succession politics. I'm getting involved in not letting someone get killed in my general vicinity." He shrugged. "I have principles. They're not complicated." She studied him. That amber gaze was the most unsettling thing about her. It felt like being looked at by something very old and very patient, something that was accustomed to seeing through the surface of things. "You are a strange person, Marcus Hale," she said. "Yeah," he agreed. "I get that a lot." Part 3, The Shale Corridor. They left Kestrel Station before dawn. Inez had restocked his medical kit and sealed the wound properly and told Sarevith. She'd introduced herself by her full name, eventually, somewhere around midnight, that she was lucky the blade had missed the major vessels and that she needed to rest for at least a week before doing anything strenuous. Sarevith had listened to this, with the expression of someone who fully intended to disregard every word the moment she was out the door. Shev had given them a frequency-masked comm unit and a handshake deal that he didn't know anything about anything. Marcus believed him. Shev was a pragmatist. The crawler rolled out into the shale corridor as the 2 pale suns began to climb, turning the rock landscape amber and violet. Sarevith sat in the passenger seat and said nothing for the first hour, watching the terrain pass with those extraordinary eyes that never seemed to blink quite as often as human eyes did. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. "North," Marcus said. "There's a relay station at the edge of the corridor about 4 days out. It's manned by a single automated system. No people, no traffic logs after the installation team left 3 years ago. From there, you can access the deep band frequencies and make contact with anyone you trust on the Zinvari home sphere without routing through any of the compromised hubs." 4 days, she said. 4 days. She absorbed this. "You are giving up your survey contract." "It'll hold. I'll claim a weather delay. Happens all the time in the corridor." "Your employers will not be." "My employers," Marcus said, "are a regional resource extraction company that does not particularly care what I do with my days as long as I file the right coordinates eventually. I have a lot of latitude." He glanced at her. Are you going to argue with everything I suggest? The amber eyes fixed on him with what he was beginning to recognize as her version of mild offense. I do not argue, I ask questions. The questions sound a lot like arguments. That, she said with great precision, is a problem of perception. He almost smiled. He focused on the road. The shale corridor was exactly what it sounded like. A vast geological formation of fractured, layered rock that stretched for over 800 kilometers across Virata III's equatorial belt. It was beautiful in a severe, inhospitable way. The rock formations rose around them like the ruins of enormous buildings, casting long shadows at midday and turning the color of blood at sunset. The crawler's sensors regularly picked up mineral deposits that made his geological instruments sing. It was good survey country. It was also, he reflected, very good country in which to disappear. He started teaching her the crawler's systems on day one, because practical redundancy seemed like the appropriate approach when you were being hunted. She learned with disturbing speed, not just the controls but the reasoning behind them, asking questions that cut straight to the mechanical logic of each system. By day's end she could drive it, run the sensor array, and access the communication equipment, though she claimed she was merely familiarizing myself. She also turned out to be a surprisingly good navigator. The eastern approach has a sensor-dead zone where the rock formations block the line-of sight for most standard tracking equipment, she said, on the evening of the first day, studying the terrain map he'd pulled up on the display. If they are using conventional Zenvari guild tracking methods, they will have difficulty acquiring us if we move into this sector before midday tomorrow. He looked at her. How do you know about guild tracking methods? A pause. I have had reason to study them. Because of the succession situation. Because, she said flatly, I have known for approximately 14 months that someone was going to try to have me killed. I chose to use the time productively. He thought about being 20 whatever she was. He genuinely couldn't tell, and spending 14 months knowing that someone had arranged your death. He thought about what that did to a person. How old are you? He asked. 31, she said. By your calendar, we age at approximately the same rate as humans in early life, slightly slower in middle age. She looked at the map. The eastern approach, yes or no? Yes, he said, that's good thinking. She made a very small sound that was not quite a scoff and was not quite acknowledgement. He added it to his growing collection of Serevith expressions and their approximate translations. Part 4, Things Said in the Dark. They camped the second night in a natural shelter formed by two massive shale formations leaning against each other, the crawler tucked in behind, running only essential power systems. No lights, no active sensors. The night on Virata III was cold and very dark, the sky thick with stars in quantities that still surprised him, even after 3 years. Serevith, it turned out, did not sleep the way humans did. She went into something she called the resting state, still, eyes fully closed but not the deep unconsciousness of human sleep, more like a state of deep physical rest while her mind continued to work. She could move from it to full alertness in under a second. It was, he reflected, a very useful adaptation. He was sitting against the crawler's front tire, a cup of thermal tea from his rations going slowly cold in his hands, when she spoke from across the shelter. Why are you doing this? He considered the question. I told you I have principles. Principles explain why you pulled me from the ravine. They do not fully explain why you are driving me through a rock corridor for 4 days and abandoning your contract. He looked up at the stars. I've been on this planet for 3 years. Before this assignment, I was on Kepler II for 2 years. Before that, I was on a water ice survey on the moons of, well, the point is I've been doing this for 11 years. Moving from contract to contract, planet to planet, and I'm good at it. And I don't particularly regret it, but there's a kind of, he paused, choosing the word, attrition, to going that long without doing something that matters, without being useful in a way that actually counts. Silence from across the shelter. You could have just left me in the ravine, he said. You would probably have eventually gotten yourself out or not. The universe would have continued in either case. But I was there, and I could help, and not helping because it was inconvenient seemed. He shrugged. Seemed like exactly the kind of small failure that compounds over time into something worse. The silence stretched. Then on Zenvar we have a concept, Verathan. It roughly translates as the weight of what you did not do. It is considered one of the most serious moral failures, not action, but inaction when action was possible. A pause. I have never heard a human articulate it. Maybe we just don't have a word for it. Perhaps. Another pause. My mother had a saying. She said that the universe does not notice whether you are royal or common, wealthy or poor, powerful or powerless. It notices only whether you showed up when it mattered. Your mother sounds like someone worth knowing. A longer pause. When she spoke again, something had shifted in her voice, something quieter. She died 4 years ago, natural causes before any of this. She stopped. Before any of this began. He didn't offer condolences, because she didn't seem like someone who wanted condolences. He just let it be what it was. My father died when I was 12, he said. I think about him sometimes on these long survey legs, wonder what he'd make of the places I've ended up. What do you conclude? That he'd think most of it was completely absurd and he'd probably love it. Marcus picked up his cold tea, drank it anyway. He was a mechanic, never went farther than the next county his whole life and was perfectly happy about it. Used to say that a man who knew where he was home was the richest man in the world. Sarevith was quiet for a moment. Do you know where you are home? He thought about it seriously. Not yet, he said. I'm still looking. When he looked over, her eyes had opened. Just slightly, the amber glow visible in the dark, and she was looking at the stars too. Part 5, the third contractor. They found the first sign on the morning of the third day. A set of crawler tracks in the shale dust that hadn't been there yesterday, running parallel to their route before curving north toward the relay station. Marcus stopped the vehicle and studied the tracks for a long time. Guild, Sarevith said. Probably. Standard Zenvari survey vehicle. You can tell from the tread pattern. But there's no reason for a Zenvari survey team to be in this sector. The resource deposits here are predominantly crystalline silicate. No commercial value to Zenvari industry. They anticipated the relay station. Or they're running multiple vectors, and this is one of them. She looked at the tracks with an expression he was learning to read as the outward face of very rapid internal calculation. How many of them are there? 3 vehicles, based on the tracks, which matches what Shev said about the guild sending 3 contractors. Then 2 of the 3 are ahead of us. She turned to look at him. We cannot go to the relay station. I know. Then what? He got back in the crawler and pulled up the terrain map, the shale corridor. 800 kilometers of fractured rock, 2 pale suns, no settlements for 400 kilometers in any direction except back the way they'd come. Behind them, at least 1 contractor, probably the one who'd tracked them from Kestrel Station. Ahead, 2 more who'd anticipated the relay station. He looked at the map for a long time. There's a deep survey access tunnel, he said slowly. About 60 kilometers northeast. I drilled it myself 8 months ago, part of my survey work. It's not on any public registry, just my own survey logs, and those are stored in Terran Consolidated's internal system, which is completely separate from any Zenvari accessible database. He traced the route on the screen. The tunnel goes through the main shale formation. On the other side, there's a secondary plateau with a signal booster array that I installed for the survey work. Military-grade long-range. I needed it to reach TC's satellite relay for filing reports. Sarevith studied the map. Can it reach the Zinvari home sphere? It's rated for 40 light-year range. The home sphere is 32. She looked at him. You have a military-grade communications array. Survey work in the outer rim requires certain redundancies. Most survey contractors use standard commercial equipment. I had a bad experience, he said, with a communications blackout during an emergency on Kepler II. I upgraded. The amber eyes held his. Something in them that he couldn't quite name, like the moment before dawn, not yet bright but with the promise of it. Show me the route to the tunnel, she said. Part 6, the tunnel. The third contractor caught up with them, 8 kilometers from the tunnel entrance. It was good driving, Marcus had to admit. Whoever they were, they'd stayed just far enough back to avoid the crawler's rear sensors while still maintaining visual contact, and they'd chosen their moment well, coming out of a rock formation at speed with the sun behind them. The impact on the rear quarter of the crawler was hard enough to crack the rear viewport and sent them sideways across the shale. Marcus held the vehicle through the skid, got it back under him, floored the accelerator. Beside him, Sarevith had braced herself and was already pulling up the crawler's rear camera feed on the display. Single vehicle, she said. No visible weapons, but a pause. They are trying to force us toward that cliff face. He could see it. The contractor's vehicle was angling, not trying to match speed, trying to herd. Smart. Pin them against the cliff, block the front, nowhere to go. He did the opposite. He turned directly toward the contractor's vehicle. Marcus. Hold on. The gap closed at speed that made the collision warning shriek. He held it until he could see the contractor's vehicle in his forward camera, until the driver had to choose between impact and swerving. And then he swerved himself, hard right. The crawler's suspension groaning as it went up over a shale ridge it wasn't designed for, and came down on the other side hard enough to knock his teeth together. The contractor went left, into the rock formation. He didn't look back. The tunnel entrance, he said, his voice steady with the particular calm that came after fear, the adrenaline still running but no longer calling the shots. How far? Sarevith looked at the display. Her voice was also very steady. 6 kilometers, bearing northeast. You are currently 2 degrees off course. He corrected course. The tunnel was exactly where he'd left it, a reinforced bore, 3 meters in diameter, drilling through approximately 2 kilometers of shale formation. He'd installed lighting when he built it, still running on the survey power pack that had another 6 months of charge. The crawler barely fit. The walls close enough on either side that he could hear them scrape. They'll follow us in, Sarevith said. They'll have to know it's here first. They'll know we went off the mapped route, but finding the entrance in that rock field will take them an hour at minimum. He drove steadily through the tunnel, the lights throwing long shadows. By then we'll be out the other side and at the array. Silence for a moment. Then you are very calm. So are you. I have been in danger before. Yeah, he said, me too, some. The way you drove into them, she paused. That was not instinct, that was calculation. Calculated gamble, he corrected. Person trying to herd you doesn't want to hit you, you're the cargo, not the target. Threat of impact is more effective than actual impact. You call the bluff. She was quiet for a moment. They were going to follow us indefinitely. You needed to disable their vehicle or change the equation. Yeah. That was a reasonable decision. High praise, he said. Another of those not quite sounds. Not a scoff, not a laugh, something between. He filed it. They emerged from the tunnel into the secondary plateau as the second sun was beginning to set, turning everything deep amber red. The sky above them going from pale gold to violet to black at the edges where space waited. The signal array was a cluster of dishes on a rock outcrop, exactly as he'd left it, the power indicator still showing green. He parked the crawler, climbed out, and started bringing the array online. Saravith was beside him before he'd finished the first step. "Tell me what to do." He told her. She did it without question and without the fraction of a second delay that came from having to think about an unfamiliar system. She'd been paying attention to everything, he realized. Not just the crawler systems he'd shown her, but his overall methodology, the way he thought about equipment and problems. It took 8 minutes to get the array fully online and calibrated. "It's ready," he said. "It'll hold a clean signal for about 40 minutes before the angle of the array relative to the home sphere's satellite network degrades enough to drop it." She looked at the array and then at him. Something in her expression that he hadn't seen before, not the cool calculation, not the forced composure, something more unguarded than that. "If you go," he said, "I'll stay here with the array until your signal is clean and give them your coordinates for extraction. Then I'll head back to Kestrel and report a vehicle incident in the corridor. And if I do not go—" He looked at her. "What?" The amber eyes were very steady. "If I do not go immediately, if I use the array to make contact with my people, arrange extraction, but do not leave tonight." He tried to read her face. "Why wouldn't you leave tonight?" "Because," she said carefully, "the 2 contractors who went to the relay station know it is unoccupied now. They will move to cut off exit routes. Tonight is not safe for an extraction vehicle to land without military escort, and arranging military escort requires communication through channels that take 12 hours to process." She paused. "I will need to wait until tomorrow." He looked at her for a long moment. "That's true. Yes. But it's not the reason you said it." The amber eyes didn't drop. "No," she said, "it is not." He sat down on the rock beside the array. After a moment, she sat beside him. "Make your call," he said. "We can figure out the rest after." She made her call. He sat beside her and looked at the stars while she spoke to whoever was on the other end in rapid Zenvari that his translation implant caught in fragments. "Safe, human, survey corridor, need extraction tomorrow morning, send the Vethra protocol, not the standard." The call took 12 minutes. When it ended, she sat for a moment with the handset quiet in her hands. 12 hours, she said. "Extraction at dawn." "Okay," he stood up, started checking the perimeter. "Then we sleep in shifts and go again at first light." Part 7, The Last Night. She took the second watch, letting him sleep first, which he hadn't expected. He'd assumed she'd argue for the second watch on grounds of her injury, and he'd planned his counterarguments. Instead, she just said, "Sleep. I'll wake you in 4 hours," and sat down against the crawler with her eyes scanning the plateau, and that was that. He slept. He woke when she touched his shoulder, exactly 4 hours later. They were quiet during the handover, communicating in the low, efficient shorthand that had developed over 3 days. Directions, observations, confirmations. The way you talked when words were less important than the thing they were conveying. At some point in the last hour before dawn, when he was sitting watch and she was in the resting state, she spoke without opening her eyes. "Marcus." "Yeah." "What you said about not knowing where home is." A pause. "I have a similar problem." He waited. "I was born to a role," she said. "Everything I was told to be and to want was attached to that role. And then someone decided the role should be eliminated, and I had to decide whether I was only the role or whether there was something underneath it that survived." She opened her eyes, that amber glow in the dark. "I am still deciding." "That seems like an important question." "It is the only one, really." She looked at the stars. "I have never sat on the ground of a survey plateau eating emergency rations and listening to the wind make sounds in the rocks before." "What do you think of it?" She considered. "It is better than I expected." He smiled, not a small one, a real one, the kind that surprised him. "High praise," he said again. This time she did laugh. Just briefly, just softly, but it was a real laugh, something that broke open for a second before she reassembled herself. He held it like something worth keeping. After this, she said after a moment, when I have returned to the home sphere and navigated whatever comes next, there will be political processes, trials, purges probably of the houses that arranged this. It will be loud and formal and exhausting. A pause. I suspect I will miss the quiet. The quiet's always out here, he said. The corridor isn't going anywhere. She turned to look at him. Really look, the way she had in the medical bay that first day, but different now. Less a calculation, more something else, something that didn't quite have a word in either of their languages. What is your next survey leg? She asked. Northeastern quadrant of the corridor, starting approximately 3 weeks after I filed the report on this one. He shrugged. Weather delay, equipment incident, should buy me enough time. The northeastern quadrant, she said. Yeah. Is it good country? Really good country. Mineral formations unlike anything else in the sector. Quiet. You can go a week without seeing another vehicle. She was quiet for a while. Then, when I have handled what needs to be handled, I intend to continue the diplomatic survey of the outer rim. The situation that brought me here was manufactured, but the rationale was real. The Zenvari High Throne has insufficient knowledge of conditions on the galactic rim. It requires direct observation. Sounds important, Marcus said. It will require, she said very carefully, someone with detailed knowledge of specific sectors. A guide, perhaps, who knows the survey routes, the terrain, the communication infrastructure. He looked at her. She looked back. I receive a fair daily rate, he said. And equipment expenses. The Zenvari High Throne, she said, is not short of resources. He looked at the eastern sky, where the first pale sun was beginning to lighten the horizon. Dawn in 40 minutes, maybe less. Let me think about it, he said. Of course, she said. Neither of them spoke again for the remaining time before sunrise. They didn't need to. Part 8. The Extraction. The extraction vehicle came in just after dawn. A small Zenvari diplomatic runner, matte black and fast, landing on the plateau with the kind of precision that spoke of military-grade piloting. 3 armed figures came out before the landing struts had fully settled. Zenvari Royal Guard, based on the insignia. The kind who were trained not just to protect, but to respond to a situation that had already gone badly and might continue to do so. The lead guard took one look at Serevith, took one look at the crawler, and then looked at Marcus with an expression that combined relief, assessment, and considerable suspicion in approximately equal measure. Serevith said something in Zenvari that his translation implant caught as, "He is with me. He is not the problem. Stand down." The guard stood down. There was a process, checking her wound, which Inez had done well and which had held through everything. The guards report to her about the situation on the home sphere, which Marcus listened to at a polite distance and understood about 40% of. A communication to the high sphere that Serevith conducted herself, formal and precise and utterly different in register from the way she'd been speaking for the past 3 days. He watched her become, in real time, what she actually was, not Sira, the battered stranger in a borrowed station jumpsuit, but Serevithnal of House Veras, third in line to the High Throne, a person who had been trained since birth to carry an extraordinary amount of weight with a straight back and no visible effort. Both things were true. He understood that now. She came to him before she boarded. "The 2 contractors ahead of us," she said. "The guard will handle them." "Okay." "The one in the rock formation." She paused. "I do not believe they were seriously injured. Their vehicle sustained significant damage, but—" "I wasn't trying to kill anyone," Marcus said. "Just move them." Something in her expression. "I know," she looked at him. "I am," she stopped, started again. The word in Zenvari is Thurath. It means something like, I owe you a debt I cannot repay, and I will not insult you by pretending I can quantify it, and I am grateful beyond what language adequately conveys." He thought about that. "We don't have a word like that." "You should." "Yeah," he agreed. She extended her hand, which he knew was a human gesture she was deliberately choosing. She'd picked it up from watching him interact with the Kestrel station crew, he realized. He shook it. Her grip was firm. Her skin was a different temperature than his, cooler, like the rock in the morning before the sun hit it. "Think about the northeast quadrant," she said. "I'll think about it." She held his hand for a moment longer than a handshake required. Then she let go, turned, and walked up the ramp into the diplomatic runner. The guards followed. The ramp sealed. He stood on the plateau in the growing light of the double sunrise and watched the runner lift off, turn, and accelerate toward the sky until it was a point of light that could have been a star, and then wasn't. Part 9, 7 weeks later. He was on his 22nd day in the northeastern quadrant, running a crystal formation survey in a section of the corridor that had never been mapped, when the signal came through on the array. He recognized the frequency immediately. It was the same one he'd given her before she left. "Saravethnal of House Vera's calling for Marcus Hale," said the signal, with the slightly formal phrasing she used on official channels. "Please respond when available." He responded. "You're alive," he said. "I am." A pause. "The situation is resolved. It was complicated and loud and exhausting, as I predicted. 2 of the houses involved have been stripped of their status. The 3rd cooperated with the investigation and was granted a lesser consequence." Another pause. "The High Throne is stable." "Good. I have submitted a formal proposal for a continuation of the diplomatic Outer Rim survey. It has been approved." She paused. "With conditions." "What conditions?" "That I take a security detail of no fewer than 4 Royal Guard. That I use registered Zenvari diplomatic vessels. That I—" Another pause, and he could hear something underneath the formal language now, something that sounded remarkably like her version of amusement. "That I do not, under any circumstances, end up in another ravine." "Reasonable conditions," he said. "I also submitted a request for an official survey consultant," she said, "specializing in the Outer Rim sectors, specifically Verada III and the surrounding quadrant. The role was approved. The compensation package was finalized. A beat. I sent the offer to a Terran Consolidated Contract address registered to 1 Marcus Hale." He looked at the rock formations around him, the crystal deposits glittering in the double sunlight, the sky turning that particular shade of violet gold that meant late afternoon in the corridor. "I didn't receive it," he said. "I know. The TC internal mail system has a significant delay for Outer Rim contractors." A pause. "I am, in effect, offering it to you now, in person, except not in person because you are on a survey plateau and I am on the home sphere." "Almost in person." "Almost in person," she agreed. He leaned against the crawler and looked at the sky. 11 years of contracts, 1 planet to the next, the particular kind of quiet that accumulates when you're very far from anything that matters. "When do you need an answer?" he asked. "I have a survey departure scheduled for 8 weeks from now," she said. "I would need an answer before then." 8 weeks? "Yes." "What's the first sector on the survey route?" A pause. "The northeastern quadrant of the shale corridor on Verada III, she said. "I was told there are mineral formations unlike anything else in the sector." He was quiet for a moment. "You've already filed the survey route," he said. "I filed a proposed route," she said. "It requires approval from the official consultant to confirm it is logistically viable." He almost said something. Then he just shook his head, looking at the crystal formations, at the double sunset beginning at the edges of the sky. "It's logistically viable," he said. Then I will see you in 8 weeks, Marcus Hale. Yeah, he said, you will. Part 10, 8 weeks later. She arrived exactly on time. The diplomatic runner was bigger than the extraction vehicle, sleek and official, with the Zinvari High Throne seal on the hull, landing on the same secondary plateau where she'd left. 4 Royal Guard came out first this time too, but they moved differently, less crisis response, more professional routine. They'd had 8 weeks to adjust to the idea that their charge was doing this, and they were doing their jobs. Sarevith came out last. She was dressed for field work, practical clothes, well-made but designed for movement, boots that could handle shale terrain. She'd kept her hair, the elaborate structural ridges of her head, simpler than the formal Zinvari styles he'd seen in the home sphere communications. She looked, he thought, more like herself. She walked down to where he was standing beside the crawler. He'd spent the last 8 weeks thinking about what to say. He'd thought about and discarded about 15 things. You're on time, he said. I am always on time, she said. It is the people around me who are not. There's a formation about 40 kilometers north, he said, that I've been saving. Largest crystalline deposit I've found in 3 years on this planet. You can see it from about 10 kilometers out, and it looks like someone built a cathedral out of purple glass. Something in her face, that unguarded thing, the one that had appeared in the last hours before dawn on the plateau, the one that broke open for a moment before she reassembled. Show me, she said. He got in the crawler. After a moment, she got in the passenger seat. The Royal Guard distributed themselves in the diplomatic runner and followed at a discreet distance. They drove north, into the corridor, into the double sunlight that turned everything amber and violet. How is the home sphere? He asked. Complicated, she said. Loud, exhausting. A pause. Better. Good. And here. He looked at the rock formations coming into view ahead, the first hints of crystal catching the light, the beginning of something extraordinary in the distance. Exactly the same as when you left. Good, she said. He thought about his father, who had known where he was home, who had said a man who knew was the richest man in the world. He was starting to understand what that meant. Epilogue. They found the cathedral formation just before midday. He stopped the crawler on the overlook, and they both got out and stood in the wind and looked at it. A spire of crystalline mineral 600 meters tall, surrounded by 40 smaller formations, every surface catching the light of 2 suns and throwing it back in fractured colors that had no names in any language he knew. Beside him, Saravethnal of House Veras, third in line to the Zinvari High Throne, stood in the wind with her eyes very wide, and did not say anything at all. Which was, he had learned, the highest praise she gave. He took out his survey recorder and started noting the formation coordinates. She watched for a moment, then held out her hand. Show me how to use that, she said. He showed her. End of story. Word count, ~9, 800 words estimated duration, minutes at 160 WPM. Seed, Sweetwater, 1988. Rugged frontier, lone protector, fierce outsider, slow burn bond. Channel, HFY Princess Queen Romance.